I think my interest in Igbo culture started with masquerades. Igbo culture is rich with hundreds of masquerade traditions and societies, all of them brought forth to communicate something specific from the ancestors or the universe itself. One of the most striking masquerades you'll encounter is the Ijele. Ijele is known as the king of masquerades. It's hailed as the biggest masquerade in West Africa and is a focal point for many proverbs. In fact, it is said that all of the other masquerades dance on the head of the Ijele. To understand Ijele and what it communicates, we have to go to the beginning, to the source of the messages that stem from the mind of Chineke and the beginning of time. So today I want to discuss Agon, the Arushi of the divine mind and universal wisdom. Agon is the Arushi that knows what God and the universe knows. Agon is the Arushi of wisdom, divination, medicine, reincarnation, and purpose. Agon is the perpetual and collective universal mind and oversees all knowing, learning, and becoming done by living things and life forces. Because of this, Agon is the first in the chain of messaging from Chineke, meaning that if Chineke has a message or a purpose for an individual, that message is embedded in Agon, and Agon brings it to the human Obi. This is done due to the fact that every living thing has an Agon, and therefore Agon is able to exist in the world of spirits as well as the world of the living. It is a direct cable into the mind of Chukwu, and it is within you and known as Onyowa, your reincarnating spirit. Igbo cosmology sees learning as an internal process. Because a person's deep mind is connected to the mind of Chineke, everything you seek to know and understand is already within your deep mind. By looking within, you're able to pull from an infinite and complete well of wisdom. This deep mind is known as Agon. Once a person learns to communicate and draw from their Agon, they become a Dibia, a word which translates to the master of the forthcoming. And so Agon is the Arushi of the Dibia, a source of the sacred arts and universal wisdom. Everyone has an Onyowa, but when a person's incarnate purpose is to become a Dibia, this Onyowa is referred to as Agon. A person with Agon often feels they have one foot in the spiritual world and the other in the physical. Individuals with Agon often are born with deep and active intuition and a heightened ability to sense spirits and spiritual presences that supersedes the average person. When Agon selects a person, the individual walks a fine line. Their endeavors were often filled with calamity, misfortune, failure, and tragedy. They often become ill and struggle with social as well as financial difficulties. They feel an increasing detachment throughout life from the world itself and a greater sense of purpose than what's presented before them. If the individual allows the clues to linger without making peace with Agon, this could lead to Aragon, a mental illness that parallels schizophrenia. Agon's messages can overwhelm the untrained mind and translate incoherently. For this reason, Agon is also known as Mompasi, or the spirit of confusion. Agon is associated with mental illness, personal strife, sadness, depression, grief, and misfortune. Agon communicates to mortals with a heavy hand. An example of how Agon communicates is through the sensation of hunger. Hunger comes to us as a pain, and if we are able to read the sensation correctly, it is a call to action. The end result is finding a meal that quenches the hunger and hopefully enriches the body. You can think clearly after eating, and you're better for it. In the Igbo language, we say Agon atalam as a way of saying I'm hungry, but this statement best translates as Agon has bitten me. Eating in this case symbolizes making peace with Agon, which a Dibia or chosen person must eventually do. More on how this is done later. Agon also points people towards their purpose by destroying the things in their life that do not align with that purpose. So, the chosen often witness recurring disaster throughout their lifetime. It tells you that you are doing the wrong things by orchestrating suffering. It also causes individuals to drift into isolation and show signs of madness that grow over time. Agun selects through the maternal line, meaning that if someone in the history of your mother's family was selected by Agun, odds are you are going to be selected, or at least the odds greatly increase. Once a person is selected and makes peace with Agun, they are expected to consecrate the peace by building a shrine to Agun. Unlike the shrine to the chi, which an individual builds to communicate with their own chi and is destroyed upon the person passing away, the shrine to Agun is permanent and expected to be maintained by your descendants or the descendants of the person chosen by Agun. If the descendants refuse, Agun lashes out and brings the misfortune it brought to the original chosen to the family as a whole. Families that maintain accord with Agun are blessed with highly creative and highly intelligent children. And it is through these children and these descendants that the blessings of Agun are brought to the world. Therefore, Agun is also associated with the arts, creativity, and general cleverness. Because of the commitment, Agun's initial presence is often a source of great fear in Igbo culture. So, when it has been identified that a person is selected by Agun, they have one of three choices. The first is to ignore it and continue with their life, seeking alternative ways to deal with their tribulations. The second is to reject it using a ceremony known as Ibagun. During Ibagun, a dibia identifies the Agun that's plaguing the individual. A ceremony is performed to break the bond it has on that individual. It's a way of asking the spirit to choose someone else, because ultimately the choice belongs to the individual that is chosen as to whether or not the person wants to follow the path Agun has predestined for them. Ibagun does not come with consequences and allows the individual to live a normal life where the success and consequences of their actions returns back to their own hands as opposed to having the torment of Agun in the background of their life. Afa is a binary code synthesized in a number of methods, most commonly through casting of shells, precious stones, or cowries. The results are decoded by the dibia and recorded in a chains of ones and zeros or ones and twos, which is then later read by the dibia to the individual as a decoded and clear message from the spiritual world. All Afa communication is communication through or with Agun, and it is therefore said that Agun is the spirit of Afa. It is my belief that a dibia interprets Afa for the mortal the way Agun interprets it for the spirits on the other side. So Afa and Agun are necessary in connecting you with the ancestors, unborn children, Chi, and Chuku itself, almost like a phone or a system of internet where two computers are communicating with each other in different dimensions. Another means of communicating with Agun is through meditation. It's important to remember that meditation in Igbo cosmology is simply anything that allows you to enter your deeper mind. Everyone has their method of doing this based on who they are, and Igbo culture allows everybody to find their path of communication with their chi, their Agun, Onyowa, and their deeper universal mind. This could involve prayer, sitting in silence, breathing exercises, fitness, dreaming, talking, taking a walk, dancing, or sitting in seclusion. All of them are relevant meditative practices, as relevant as they are able to work for the individual. In Odinani, you do what works best for you to achieve the end goal, because that is between you and your chi. Throughout history, you'll find stories of prophets or individuals of great achievement that were given messages from God to share with the world. A consistent factor in these stories is a period of contemplative isolation, be it through meditation, prayer, pulling away from society, taking a long journey, or even involuntary confinement like prison. You'll also notice this being a recurring theme with great creatives. These moments allow the message from Agun to come clearly from the spiritual world to the person because they have pulled far enough from the material world to have to confront and confine in their inner universal mind. I've heard the story of a Dibia whose initiation required him to stare at a tree until he saw himself in that tree. And in this practice, he made peace with Agun, the universal consciousness. In Igbo culture, as well as much of or a lot of West Africa, particularly in cultures that practice a form of Afa, you will find stories of a wise and tricky turtle that constantly outsmarts the other creatures of the forest. These are often children's parables that speak of a tortoise named Mbe, whose wisdom is either the cause of his troubles or sees him through challenges. One Mbe story that made its way to North America and the world at large as a consequence is the story of the tortoise and the hare. The reason for this is because the tortoise, as well as the snail, are both creatures that are able to enter themselves and able to emerge with true wisdom, while the rest of us rely on our foreminds or external observation. In fact, the most effective form of Afa is known as Afambe, which is a form of Afa done with a turtle shell. In ceremonies where Agun is invoked, we use Ekwembe or the tortoise shell drum to bring the spirit forward. Therefore, the tortoise is seen as a symbol of Agun, as well as the owl, the ground squirrel, the snail, the ibis, and the leopard. Whichever method an individual uses to communicate with Agun, if they learn that they are supposed to be a Dibia or they have been chosen by Agun to serve as a Dibia, the next step is to do a ceremony to initiate you as a Dibia known as Iru. The ceremony allows a person to become a member of Uagun or the universe of Agun and therefore a Dibia. Iru centers around an individual making peace with Agun and understanding their purpose as well as the reason for their tribulations, facing them head on and accepting their divinely ordained path. As a Dibia, the individual, through Agun, becomes a source of divine knowledge, insight, and wisdom for the community around them and the world at large. They are the community's connection to the universal mind and the wisdom of the universe as it is unable to be seen by the untrained eye. Adibia is also a negotiator between spirit and person, as well as a doctor, herbalist, and psychologist. It is also important to remember that most societies in this part of West Africa were headed by Dibias and oracles, but due to colonization, many of these titles have been mistranslated as kings. If you go back and do the research or even observe their functions in today's society, you will see that they are actually priests or oracles or Dibia as we know them in my own culture. Once peace is made with Agun, the Dibia's powers are unlocked. They are able to read the sky and therefore serve as their community's calendar. They are also able to read the forest and know which plants heal various ailments of the body without being taught prior. They're able to listen to their intuition and pull from that well that teaches them things that wouldn't otherwise be known if using the foremind. And therefore, with that great power comes great responsibility. Agun oversees the practice of the Dibia almost like a medical board oversees a doctor, ensuring that the practice of the Dibia is ethical. The Dibia takes on a code of ethics brought to the world by Agun, which ensures that the Dibia never overcharges an individual, never uses their powers maliciously, never uses their powers to harm or deceive others, is honest, and upholds the laws of the various communities they're in. There are also various sacraments, such as not climbing particular trees, fasting throughout different parts of the year, and generally holding the secrets of the community and passing them down to the next generation in the right and proper way. A Dibia must also abstain from lying, as well as live a life that is humble. Agun rewards humility, and in fact, Agun's shrine is one of the most basic and simple you would probably see in all of Igbo cosmology. It's often a hill or a small mound made with sand surrounded by stones, or the ogirishi tree, which is also the tree that the ikenga is made from. Making peace with Agun is not the end of the journey. You must also sustain that peace by remaining ethical and being a trustworthy source of the blessings that come into the world through you by the universal mind. After all, Agun itself had to go through an extremely difficult test in order to unlock its wisdom. When Chuku created the Arushi, one of them was particularly curious. This spirit noticed that Chuku knew all things and was intrigued by the idea of having this ability. So, this curious spirit approached Chuku and said to the universal God that I wish to know what Chuku knows. Chuku challenged the Arushi and said, in order to know what I know, you must balance all 45 other Arushi on your head. So, Agun accepted the challenge, and with great patience and discipline was able to place all 45 Arushi on its head at once. This great feat made Agun the wisest and most knowing of all the Arushi, and so Chuku sent Agun into the realm of the living to oversee the reconstruction of the universe to come. And so, after the universe settled, Agun was in all things. There's Agun in the rivers, there's Agun in the earth, there's Agun in the animals, and as well as Agun in human beings. It was even recently brought to my attention that there is Agun in the Arushi themselves, and the two primary deities in Igbo cosmology, Chukwu and Allah, both have Agun within them. And so Agun is a reincarnating spirit as well. It is said that every time Agun chooses a person, it enters the world as a blessing and enlightenment for those of the world through that individual. Of all of Agun's incarnations, there was one that was considered the most perfect and most absolute. That was his incarnation into an ancient man named Ele. Ele, as he was respectfully called, was as wise as the universal mind and was said to be Agun in human form. He was one of the architects of godly culture on earth, teaching mankind lessons from Chukwu and the great beyond. When Ele passed, his glorious life of sharing the mysteries of the universe and godly culture with mankind was celebrated with a great masquerade. This masquerade would be as large as he was great, and like the spirits that he came from, would balance all other masquerades on his head. The masquerade to commemorate the life of Ele is known as Ije Ele,